really like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I definitely thank sophiajacob for presenting these lectures. It's something that is, I think, truly useful. Something that that I'm always excited about is that the amount of artists in Baltimore that get involved and figure out a way to do what needs to be done for other artists and for themselves. So it's a really great thing doing this lecture and sophiajacob doing the lecture series. I've been in this building for about 15 years now, 16 years, I guess. So long I forget sometimes, but I originally grew up in Indiana and moved out here to go to Mecca. And I met some people. I had gone to the Marie Walsh Art Fellowship the summer before I moved out here, and I met a few artists that were living in this building. And so as soon as I moved out here and met in some of my classes, they were like, "Oh, you got to move into this warehouse space with us." And as soon as I saw it, I was like, "Wow, I want to get out of the commons and the student housing and move into this big warehouse space." And it was a pretty rough space back then compared to the way Gallery 4 is now. There had been a few people living there, but it was a little more sort of shanty town with old pieces of plywood with linoleum space walls, and there was really only a couple of small rooms. So as we moved in, the artist I knew that I met in Colorado was Isaac Copy, and he came from Jacksonville, Florida. We were both freshmen, but there was a lot of other artists from Jacksonville, Florida up here. One of them was Jason Hughes, who I ended up co-founding Gallery 4 with. Another, Philip Esslin. He was a few years older than us, and he was actually a senior and getting ready to graduate as we were moving in. So it was really great to move into the space and to have artists that were, basically had been through everything that you were going through with school and with moving into the space, and we're sort of set up in the city and really sort of take a mentorship kind of an approach. And I think that began sort of the way that I dealt with other artists and dealt with community and working as a group and really trying to work together and help other people and work together to create projects that are bigger than what you could do on your own. So we after a series of time of fixing things up and starting to build walls, Isaac and I from the very beginning talked about building a gallery, and we had all these sort of big ideas, and we wanted to put a wood shop in where we could build our artwork and make stretches. That's how I was actually I moved here to be a painting major. But it was actually Philip was a sculptor, and when he saw me building my sketches, he was like, "You're gonna be a sculptor." And I definitely been my whole life been building a lot of things, but our school had really more of a technology department, which I took classes in, and then the arts department was more 2D photography, painting, and drawing, and whatnot. So moving in and getting exposed to new things and take on this task of turning a warehouse space into a gallery. So we began working and building things up, and we had a few shows sort of unorganized. And our first show at Gallery 4 was actually The Fool. It was a building-wide show. It was at the time the sixth floor was sort of former Micah students, but they did like faux finishing. So the third, fourth, and fifth floors. And different incarnations than what's there now. But then shortly after that, in October, that was in April of '99, and maybe it was October of 2000, somewhere there. But in September of 2000, we had our first show. It was really just the Gallery 4 solo show. It was Saturday 5, and I think it shows some images. But essentially it was, we found that there were a lot of artists that were underrepresented There's a lot of small sort of student-run galleries or DIY galleries there were really only one or two DIY galleries, and they weren't really presenting things on a professional level. And there were a lot of grad students and other artists that were making really great work. They weren't showing it in Baltimore, they moved to New York and they get a show. Or if they got a show at, say, Ace Gallery, then of course, like, Grimaldi's and the other Baltimore gallery would be, calling them and instantly wanting to show them. But providing a space for people that were ready to exhibit on a larger scale and on a professional way, was something that was needed in Baltimore, so we worked to do that. And this piece back there, the washing machine, is actually an old piece of mine. It was an installation. It involves sound. It has a speaker that was tuned with sort of a dirty oscillator, so it had a little bit of a warble, so a low rumble, and there were wall drawings on the wall. And it was an early installation. And I've always been interested with sound and with creating environments, and in my work, that was sort of an initial piece. The gray sort of paintings on the wall, those are Jason Hughes' work. And then there's this sort of irrigation system with Mark Dollars, who also lived at Gallery 4. He moved in, I think, right before the show. So we kept on moving along. At this point, it was mostly Jason and I that curated the shows and did our work. And I think that in about 2007, we did a renovation of the gallery, and we started working with really getting everybody who was in the space, all 6 people involved, or as much as they wanted to be. And usually there was 3 or 4 people that were extremely involved, and a few other people that were less involved, and depending on people's schedule. But working together, we were able to put things together, put together better websites, and really sort of, as we would look for roommates, we really started to essentially be hired for jobs, so they would work well with the gallery and who could fulfill our specific needs. So I'm going to show a little bit of my commercial work actually that I do. I do a lot of work for museums, and the reason why I'm showing this is that, for one, it's allowed me to develop a large sculpture studio that I can use. Essentially I buy equipment to make sculptures, and then I figure out a way to use that to make money to fund other artwork. And sometimes it's interesting because the pieces actually look like these. I think these pieces are more sculpturally cased. It's a big round case there. I don't like the round case so much, but the pieces individually in the studio are pretty wild. But it's an interesting way, and there's a lot of challenge for me to people like to. There's certain designers that I work with, and they really like to, if they see me do a cantilever staircase, or if they see me do something that involves a certain new idea or a certain new technique, then they really sort of try to push to see how far they can take me and what I can do. The other thing is that working in museums, we do a lot of it's all about presentation, and it really sort of helps with the curatorial stuff that I'm trying to run in a gallery, because you're working with exhibitions, you work with designers, you see how things are laid out, and why things are laid out. And it really, when you get into, even though something might be a 2D or a 3D work, when you get into an exhibition or an installation, it can become a time-based work, depending on how the audience experiences it, and how it's revealed to them, and how different elements are presented to them at different points. And that's, I think, the biggest thing is to think about, is like how how people experience things. Like this, for instance, it's the 1812 show at the Historical Society, and so this is the moment you walk in, and there's a gallery with so it basically starts with life before the war, everyday life, wars declared, there's ships, there's weapons, and then at this moment, this is just to the right of this image is the Star Spangled Banner. go say, can you see? And so at this point, you turn around and you can see through this 3-main glass case into the first, the 1912 commemoration, the Navy battles, the burning of DC, through the window, and all the way back into life as it existed before the war. And so that's, you know, thinking about it, and most viewers aren't going to get that, but some will, and even if they don't fully understand this, as you walk in and see this document and turn around, you have this vista of, you know, everything that's happened for the past 100 years, or 200 years. You, there is at least a sort of and maybe even an ununderstood thing that happens with them, of being able to turn around and see that and have that experience, and to create an experience for them that is maybe similar, or it relates in a way to, you know, what Francis Scott Key had. And so I think, and I definitely try to do that within my work, and also at the same time, it's the other thing is interpreting and presenting objects from our culture. And so in this, it's you know, historical objects and artifacts, and you know, for me, artistically, I like to do more interpretation than what typically happens in a museum. But I think this really sort of has had a significant influence on the work that I do. So at a certain point, I got a little, I suppose, I felt that I was spending too much time on the gallery and working on other people's artwork, not enough on my own. So I decided to create another gallery, which is probably not the best idea. But I wanted to create something that was both a work of art and something that would function and help address issues that I was experiencing. So the Bicycle Gallery is designed to help share our work with other audiences, unrealized audiences, an interjection of art into everyday life, as well as this is in Art Basel in Miami. So initially, I was excited. Gallery 4 participated in the first Art Basel, and I was really excited to do it again. But people at the gallery were not really into that. We had a good thing going downstairs, and they just wanted to keep working on the gallery and not spend the money and the time to go elsewhere. And so that's sort of when I came up with the idea for the Bicycle Gallery. And it's an interesting thing. It's sort of musicians are able to travel and go on tour and have their shows. For artists, it's much more difficult for an artist to, how do you get your work out there? How do you get seen in a different way? And this was definitely in Miami was a lot of fun. It was a really great experience. And unfortunately, lately I've been too busy making more work and working to generate money to fund everything. But ideally, in the future, I'd like to have a gallery or a storefront where this can function in Baltimore, to where it's basically set up and ready to go, and myself or other volunteers can go in and write it a couple times a week. And also try to figure out a way to travel or to set up bicycle galleries in other cities. And I was actually talking with somebody a couple weeks ago about possibly there's an opportunity maybe to do that in Raleigh, North Carolina. So hopefully in the future we can get that worked out. But it was, a lot of fun. I think there's a video here. So I'll sort of show a couple minutes of the video of us taking off and riding around. It's interesting too, because the other previous art battles that I've been to, I remember there not being any bicycles. And for some reason this year there were tons of bicycles everywhere. But the audience interaction was pretty wild. And it's funny because I was usually riding in front, and people would sort of ride by and they wouldn't even know what was happening. And then I think Adam might be here. He was riding he was like the last cart, and people would stop and always try to stop and talk to him. So it was like I would ride by and they would get surprised, and then there was kind of realize what was happening with the third cart. And when it was parked, people were less interested in it. As soon as you try to ride somewhere else, everybody would get really excited. They'd be like, oh, wait, stop. The biggest difficulty with this is not riding too fast because you have artwork on there, and you have to be careful. But that actually worked pretty well and ride pretty pretty fast and pretty easily, so it's just remembering to go slow. It's funny too, because I never noticed it, but there is a light tower right there, which later became part of my work. So pretty funny. Once my work usually addresses issues that I'm trying to sort out myself, or that I feel that other people are sorting out. And once I do something like a light tower or a gas station, it's kind of interesting how often you notice those moments of an ice machine. So I think we stopped here because Robert was up. We were on Miami Beach, where the main convention center was. We rode over to Miami and to the mainland, and we went over to Scope and Pulse and some of the fairs over there. But the whole, our paths we were riding around was definitely a lot of fun. This is another piece that happens sort of about the same time. This is Sirens. And it is essentially it's a piece that I've been thinking about for a long time, but it didn't. It took a long time for me to get the piece to where I wanted it to be. It's 3 fire extinguishers with the bottoms cut off, and I cut one apart a long time ago, like 10, 12 years ago, and it rang. It had this beautiful ring, like a bell. And so I was trying to recreate that, but in a way that wasn't too artificial. And I found that by putting a speaker in the middle on this rod, that it can slide in and out, and you can basically tune it to different notes. And then the blue box is a analog sine wave generator with tremolo and vibrato, and it's something that I built myself. It would be easier to use an Arduino or to actually generate the sound, the waves with another, like a function generator on a computer or something like that, and just have a recording that I played. But the one thing with this is it really allowed me to experiment and to adjust all the settings so that it can be tuned to the space. And there's one higher frequency note, it's a center fire extinguisher, and 2 lower frequency notes that do a nice phasing, which really kind of buzzes inside your head. And it's kind of what I wanted. It's something that's, that's slightly seductive, but it definitely has this mildly unpleasant quality at the same time. And you'll hear all 3 of them start. And definitely, depending on the room acoustics and where they're placed, there's really kind of like. And it was interesting I showed over to Arlington Art Center, and it was in a room with other painters actually, and the people that were interested in sound and sort of other things were always like, can you turn this is good, you guys get louder, can you turn it up? And then the painters always wanted to, it was like they were walking and saying, did you turn that down? So it was an interesting thing. And then this is Cowboys and Engines, which is, I feel like to this day sort of the most successful thing that I've done. Is ideas that I've been working on for a long time put together in one show. But really in terms of what I was speaking about before, of like creating using time and sound, and revealing things to people as they move through it to really create sort of an overall experience. I believe there's a couple of videos here at the end. And again, all this is issues, it's issues that I have and that I sort of struggle with, and I think that America struggles with, and definitely there's times where it's just, why do people understand things differently than I do? But I think also in a way of presenting it in a way more in that museum way of taking these elements of our culture and presenting them and interpreting them enough that hopefully people will get a better understanding, but really to look and examine about what we're doing. This is Ireland. And it's 2 tractor trailers off pipes with these rain caps. And actually, a few years back at our bad way, I had a video that I did on my phone of a Coca-Cola truck that had this kind of rain cap and was rattling. And some solenoids and square wing timer that pops them up and down. And these, this is another piece I worked on for 3 years. So more like, I can come up with a concept and then it takes time to generate the money and just to do all the work. Just making 6 of these, at some point it's like, why did I make 6? There's like this assembly line thing happening, but it's definitely, I felt like that was the amount that I needed to have this sort of like engine, this sort of pumping and have an oil field. And they're powered by a solar panel that's outside that charges. There's 2 batteries in the back, so it charges up the batteries so they can run at night or run whenever. The solar panel keeps them powered. There's a walkthrough video, but I don't think I guess it's not in this group. But you could, when the elevator door opened, you could hear the exhaust pipes clatter, and you would walk through the space, and it took a while before you actually realized what was making that sound. And as you got deeper in the space, you'd hear the oil pumps, creaking and churning. It's sort of, there's initially going to be more exhaust pipes, and I edited them, and then I built the ice machine at sort of the last day or two before the show. To me, sometimes, often I spend more time thinking about the work and what's the right fit and what's the right way to present it and how do I want it to look than I actually fabricating it. Probably actually with the exception of the oil pumps, so those took a lot of time. And with the bearings and with all the parts, it took a lot of time just to raise the money to do that. So this is an installation I call UFO. It's 2 NYPD style light towers, and it's in the Goucher College with the blue police barricade in between the 2. There's before a show called Power Struggle, and it was right around. I've been working in New York for a few years, right around early September, at a museum that's at Battery Park, which is near where Ground Zero is. And they store all the police equipment there. And it's a really interesting thing because it's bright white, always polished. The light towers actually function. They don't have a generator in them. They're just plug in power, but they actually lift up and telescope as a regular light tower would. But I walked in, so as I walked from these towers that were parked outside from the Kennedy University celebration, just after, so they were all parked and being stored. I walked up and I saw the Occupy movement in the park. And the same light towers are blasting, into the tents and everything. And then I walked further in more to the Lower East Side, where the hotel where I was staying was, and there's light towers lighting up a soccer field so kids could play soccer. There was a hurricane that came through, and the lights in the park have been knocked out. So I think it's sort of this element that's everywhere. Sporting events, it's at Art Basel, it's at and it's used in multiple different ways. It's sort of a symbol of authority, but at the same time it creates safe environments and does those other things. It's a weird sort of element, and it's one of these things that I found that sometimes you make work about things that are kind of haunting you, and then sometimes you make work and then it makes you realize how much it's something about my roommate and I went to the dump the other day to get rid of some stuff, and we're cleaning out the room in the gallery, and it's like, geez, there's light towers that are parked outside the dump, they're everywhere. It's like they're chasing me. So this is the most recent work that I've done. It's actually still up. It's at Mount Royal Median Strip by in front of Mount Royal Tavern in Michael. And Kim asked me to do, I guess as part of the Sondheim Star Palace show, to do something in the Median Strip. And I came up with a couple ideas. I think the bank lobby was the first idea. And then it turned out that there was only, I guess nobody else was doing the outdoor stuff except for maybe John and the next meeting trip. So I had this idea for the checkout lanes, and they really wanted the gas pumps, so we put them out there too. But it's sort of creating a commerce strip. It's all this. The title of the show is Badlands, and the checkout lanes are gorge. So this basically they describe landforms that are created by the erosion of the plateau. So the checkout lanes are gorge, the bank lobby is butte, and the gas pumps are pinnacle. But they're all places that are designed to create a streamlined flow of people, of information, and they're all places where humans interact with each other. Where nowadays, like the gas pumps have been replaced with credit card gas pumps, where you don't actually have to talk to somebody and leave them money. A lot of banking is happening online. A lot of shopping is happening online. So there's a major transition away from human interaction. Yeah, our escape was pretty funny. There's people on their cell phones, and they were giving away free coffee and free jam or something nearby, so everybody using the table. So I think there's a Smucker's tennis going across the way. But it was an interesting thing in trying to recreate the checkout lanes, and going to stores and trying to photograph checkout lanes. The manager shows up pretty quick when you're taking pictures of the cash register area. The Walmart's going to be more excitable than, say, the grocery store. But it was an interesting thing. It's a lot of work that I've done. Occasionally I have some friends that want something done, like a kitchen or something like that, but I'll build for them. And it really pushed me into experimenting with different materials and doing different things. Let's see. And that's sort of how I got into I guess it's always an interesting thing when you can have the opportunity to sort of experiment and branch out. Usually there's moments of difficulty where you're like, how am I going to get this done? And then once you figure that out, you can use it, everywhere. So this was a kitchen I did in Cherry. It's grain matched, so the grain actually wraps continuously around the entire island and the entire cabinet. This is a kitchen I did for another friend that it's brushed anodized aluminum. And it's really where I first got to using the aluminum sheets that I use in the gas pumps and the paint things. So it was a tremendous amount of time for me to figure out how to do this and how to do it within the book. Because you can get laminates from Formica, but they're like hundreds of dollars, where you can get this stuff and it's like, it's a third of the price. But to find the material, to figure out how to get it, to figure out how to work with it, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of time to figure that out and to come up with a certain resolve. And then with after you gain experience working with the material, then I found that I needed to get some new machinery to be able to do stuff that I wanted to do. So I got a shear and a press brake, and really be able to bend it and do things that I couldn't do before. So there's also in this same house had a cantilever staircase that I built, where there's a lot of steel on the wall, and did a lot of work with an engineer, which I did a project with a friend for the Ravens Stadium. So this is the staircase. So there's a ton of steel inside of the wall, and the treads basically just project out of the wall. I didn't have to drywall that. The contractors did that, which I was really excited about, to be the sculptor who gets to mold the steel and do all the math and have the engineer approve it, and somebody else has to deal with the drywall problem. So sometimes I have to deal with that, and I never do that. And actually the treads on the stairs, it's a 3/4 inch acrylic piece. And so some people are really frightened to walk up them because there's really just nothing there. But once you walk up them, it's pretty cool. And it's really wild to be able to get to a point where I was able to calculate the deflection. It was gonna, if a 300 pounds was placed at the edge of the step, it would deflect an 1/8 inch. And to be able to see how close the calculated to the real world was pretty amazing. And the good thing is that after doing all that, I have all those calculations and all the data I need for steel tubing, for steel channel and whatnot, that I can make those calculations again on other projects that I work on. This is a bed that I made for some clients. This is actually for a friend worker that the studio that I have is there's two of us. There's another company, Loopworks, that hires several artists. I think actually at one point Mike and Mitchell was working there a long time ago. So it's a good thing where there's places like this that hire people and or use people as contractors and allow them the opportunity to use the equipment, and a lot of people being there on the weekends making their own work and whatnot. But so, and also because of that network, you have friends that maybe somebody wants them to do something and it's like, oh, I don't have time, or it's something that they don't know how to do, and so they say like, you want to take this one, and so that's what basically these beds were for some wealthy people in the Hamptons. But it was fun working with. I worked with a lot of Medex, and I worked with the Lockheed Myers one. And this is 2007. This is the project that I worked with my friend Malcolm Major on building 2 bar areas for the Ravens Stadium and the LA flight deck. And that was the biggest project I'd done at that point. It's a lot of the projects I get are rush projects, so amazing things have to be done in, say, 30 days or something like that. And work, I'll be working 20 hours a day or something like that to get the job done. And then this was also a thing where we really had to work with, we did a lot of plasma cutting, but we had to work with engineers and coordinate with a lot of different businesses to get things done. There's a design firm from California or from Chicago. The marketing company for Miller Lite was in California, and then we had to deal with the stadium authority, the people at the stadium, and engineers and everything all together. So it was one of those things where it seems crazy at the time, but once you've done it, it's a good thing. We were pretty happy. This is actually my forklift that through this project I was able to buy a forklift. It's really old and it's really tiny, and if Malcolm was a little bit smaller than me, it looks much better driving it than I do. So I have a picture of him driving it. But if you're moving a 3/4 inch sheet of 4x8 sheet of 3/4 steel is about 900 some pounds. So even though my studio has a hoist system that sort of moves around, it's not as accessible enough for us to be able to get the steel and even to be able to unload a truck full of steel. So we had to get the forklift at that point. And so. There's the stadium. We were initially really upset that it was like everything seemed really heavy and overbuilt. That it was 3/4 inch plate, and we're like this is wild. And then when we put it into the stadium next to these like huge channel, it's like, oh, this is a little bit dainty. So I've never been in the stadium before then. I haven't been back, but it was a pretty wild, definitely a really wild thing. It's just like, wow, it was like a huge coliseum. So to have the ability to make something sort of sculptural, and to be able to learn what I learned from that was pretty wild. So I also have been making some furniture as well. So this is a table I made. I've been sort of experimenting with structural steel and used sort of more elegantly. So there's tapered structural channel, and then the apron is a mitered structural channel. That gives it sort of a nice sort of effect that say like carved wood or molded wood would look like. And the top is actually it's sort of industrial too. It's American chestnut, which is essentially almost extinct. There's a blight that killed all the trees. It was the most densely forested wood across the East Coast, and it grew fast, and it was a really nice wood to use. But a fungus, they brought over Chinese chestnuts, and they had a fungus that killed all the American chestnut trees. And so this was reclaimed from this old barn siding. And so it's wormy chestnut. It's got these little holes that we had to fill. But it's beautiful. It's weathered, and it has a nice patina that you wouldn't get anywhere else. So that's something I would put. There's actually a dresser I just made, where I made like my own poles and everything are made out of structural channel, like this big string channel that was sliced and welded to square head bolts. But I don't have any photographs of that. So, but I think that it's interesting is to go through and I suppose as I go through life and try how do you exist as a creative individual, and I've never been. I'm perfectly capable of having a day job where I go in and I sit down and I work every day, but I've never been very content with that. And as I've grown up and as I, even moving to Baltimore was a situation where I guess art was my way out of that standard life that was something that I had done and I'd done well at, and I had scholarships and I could move into a new experience for myself. My father and my brother and my grandfather on my dad's side are all engineers, and so I sort of like already set up to go and go to engineering school and was in and ready to go, but I knew that there was an opportunity for me to move into a different place, and I wanted to move. I was going to artist to Chicago, but I really wanted to move a significant distance. I think at the time I was thinking about at least 3 states from where I was, which is but I think essentially it's a different, exposed to much different sensibility and a different environment, totally different influences than what I would have back in the Midwest, which is sort of where I grew up. And I think a blend of those influences is really what sort of affects my work and is sort of describing my work. There's a lot of different changes and ideas that and things that I do now that are totally different from where I was 20 years ago. And so being young enough and being of the mindset that I was able to change the way that I felt about things, the way that I learn multiple points of view and multiple understandings of the same similar ideas or similar concepts, was a pretty major change, and I think that all of that growth as I fight through that and make those changes is essentially where my work comes from. So, but yeah, and I guess the other thing is, I think it's good for other people to look at what's around them and look at what they can do and look at how they can change things. It might be something smaller, it might be something huge. And I tend to find that I get hung up, like if I'm working on object mounts or if I'm working on something, I get really excited and I'll worry too much about before I get started. And then as soon as I get started, it's like, wow, this is no big deal. This is pretty easy, and it's fun to do. And so that's the biggest thing for myself is sometimes getting past the stumbling block. And I've been lucky to make, and maybe at some points I try never to take a foolish risk, but there's a calculated risk, and to push that and to continue to push your boundaries and what you're capable of and what you think you're capable of, and really try to apply that to multiple aspects of your life and the projects that you work on. And in general, it seems to work out pretty well. Sometimes it's extremely frustrating, but the frustration that happens usually creates creativity. If you're smart about it, the frustrating moments create a lot of growth, potential for growth. So I would definitely encourage everybody to think about where they are and what they're doing. I know it's not. There's sort of some people have sort of an entrepreneurial instinct and other people don't. And there's sometimes I wish I could turn that off because I definitely I tend to overwhelm myself on occasions. But overall, it's definitely a fun experience. And I know that at this point, I think there's like I don't even know if I probably have 20 roommates, maybe more than that, who are all over the country, who are all over the world actually. And it'll be interesting. Like our first solo show was Andy Holton, and he had just come back from Berlin. He's like, when I was in Berlin, the guy who showed me around, he used to live here. And I was like, Marcus, and it's like it's funny with my own roommates. It was like you know, I hadn't set him up with Marcus, but he just was an artist going to Berlin, and somehow got connected with him as his tour guide. So, but it's interesting the connections you can make working together and working as a community. It's certainly been a big help for myself, and you know, I hope that I've been able to support other people in a similar way. I think that's it.
We have time for one or two questions for Dustin. Everyone ask them.
Yes, I actually did a lot of building, and I did we had sort of technology. So I studied electronics. I had done some metalworking, like working on you know, a lathe and doing some other things like that in school. And I feel like even with my paintings, I got to where I was adding sculpture elements, basketballs, or like weird things in my paintings. And when I was taking my sculpture classes, I would worry too much about, you know, or that they would be, don't paint it. Like it's like, well, I would worry about color in my sculptures, and I worry about, you know, sculptural form in my paintings. So it was definitely an interesting, a little bit of an interesting transition. But I think that at the time, Micah was a very formal school, and the biggest thing for me wasn't the transition from painting to sculpture, but was if you want to make a series of sculptures that record sound and transmit it from one, so say it's 3 sculptures, from one to the other. And interpret the sound and reproduce it in a different way. You know, if I told a teacher that that's what I wanted to do, they just looked at me like I was crazy, and they had no idea. And to a certain extent, I found they didn't really know the right artists to recommend me to look at. So, and I know that a lot of that has changed in the past, you know, 15 years or so. But that was, I think that was sort of more of a difficult thing of being. Sort of more contemporary and dealing with electronic media and dealing with that, I guess dealing with those issues rather than formal issues. At the time the school was more structured too. Anybody else?
Thank you, Dustin.